Hello everyone, welcome to the TestNG tutorial series. So in this series, we'll talk about the TestNG. We'll see the different examples related to TestNG, as well as we'll see different commands, and we'll see how TestNG is working in our real-time test scenarios. So in this video, let's understand first what TestNG is. So TestNG is an automating test frameworks in which NG stands for next generation. So TestNG is basically inspired by JUnit. It's advanced part of TestNG. So using TestNG, we can generate reports and easily get status of test cases like test pass, failed, or skip test cases. So usually when you work with Selenium, there you don't get these reports like what exactly the status of every test case is. So using TestNG can generate this TestNG, basically you say it by default generate these reports like the particular test case is passed, failed, or skipped. Now, the most important question, why do you use TestNG? Let's understand a test scenario. Let's assume that we have 5 test cases to test. We create separate methods for every test cases. Now, when we run every test cases and assume the 4th test case fails. So in this case, only correct the 4th method, and you can run the 4th one only as the rest till it's already done. So this can be achieved only through TestNG. So it provides the flexibility to run the test cases based on choice. So out of 5 test cases, if one test case fails, so that particular test case will be marked. Just go to that test case, do the changes, and again run it. That's what TestNG bring it for you. So that's why we use TestNG in real-time projects. And this is the most important part. Like we write the codes in form of Selenium, but executes it in form of TestNG. And that's why it's equally important to Selenium. Now, this is how the TestNG structure looks like. So if you see this diagram here, we have different test cases like test case 1, 2, 3, 4. And here only it talks about Selenium. That means these test cases are written only in Selenium. Now, these test cases are applied to the TestNG. We apply TestNG to these test cases. And also, if you see here, this section like XML, this is also applied to TestNG. Now, once this XML test cases all are applied to the TestNG, then this in returns you the report and the login part. So all these features are applied to the TestNG, and what in return TestNG gives you, it gives you the logging details as well as the report of your test cases. So here XML will also play an important part, because just to handle the test cases or to execute the classes separately, we'll need this XML. So here you'll get a knowledge of this XML as well, like what exactly this is and how we use it. So this test cases and along with XML, the TestNG completely perform and gives you the report that you are looking for. And that report basically will help you to understand the status of your test case. That's all the story of TestNG. I hope this story is enough to understand how exactly the TestNG is working. So installing the TestNG is very easy thing. Just you have to follow a few steps and you'll be easily install TestNG in your Eclipse. So the very first thing what you have to do is in Eclipse, select the help option. From help option, select Eclipse marketplace option, and then you'll get in search bar. You have to search for TestNG and click the install button. Now, if in case TestNG is installed by default, then in that case, this install button will change to installed. So just I'll show you in my system. So here just I go to this help option here on top. From this help, come to this Eclipse marketplace. Now just click on Eclipse marketplace. And when you do this, here you get the search bar. So in this search bar, you have to search for TestNG. So just wait till the search bar opens. Now, once the search bar is available, here just search for TestNG. Just write TestNG and press enter. So in my case, the TestNG is installed. So this shows the installed button. Now, if in your case it's not installed, then in that case, you'll get this install button. Click this install button. After this, the next step, it will ask to accept the terms and conditions. So in case we get trust selected option, select all trust selected option and accept the risk. Now this is new added to the Eclipse. If you will see, this thing was not before. Now this trust selected thing is added, where it asks you to select whether you trust all the files that's added. So you have to accept the risk and all. That's fine. That will not affect your system. Now Eclipse will ask you for restart. So click the restart button and TestNG is installed in your Eclipse. Now the trust selected button will something look like this. Like you have a trust selected button below. So you'll have some button like this, and this is how it will look like. So just you have to select that button, and at last the TestNG will be installed in your Eclipse. So that's the small story, how to install Eclipse, and this is how the Eclipse will be installed. And just keep your Eclipse installed. Later, you have to add few files related to TestNG that I'll show you when I'll start using the TestNG in our project. Now here I prefer using Maven project structure because in real-time projects, we'll be using the Maven project structure. So it's better that you get familiar to this Maven in the beginning itself. So here are the steps that I have written to create a Maven project structure. Now I'll follow the same when I'll be doing the projects. So first let's see these slides and then I'll get to the real time. So in Eclipse, it says go to the file option and select Maven project option. Like from file, go to new, from new, go to this Maven project option, and straight away you'll get the Maven project. Now that's one way. The other way is go to the project option that is here itself. You'll find a project option. This is the project option just below the Maven project. Go to that option. Here, search for Maven. When you search for Maven, at bottom, you'll find Maven project. So just select that, and then this structure comes where you have to click on this create a simple project. Now, why I say create a simple project? Because when I create a simple project, no dependencies are added by default. So here we'll be adding our own dependencies. Now, if in a project we are working, then it's obvious that we'll be using dependencies. Basically, if we are in TestNG, we use Selenium. So we need to add the files related to Selenium. Again, you have to add the files related to TestNG as well. So instead of adding these files manually, here we will be adding these things to dependencies that we'll see in upcoming videos. Right now, just create a simple project and then Maven project will create. But before creating a Maven project, you need to add the group ID and artifact ID, these two options. Now you'll have more options like packaging, name, descriptions, but the first two options, group ID and artifact ID, is compulsory to fill. Now in group ID, you need to tell group ID is just like the package name and artifact ID is the project name. So basically you need to give these two details and the name of project as well as the descriptions. These two are option, but I would suggest give some name and give some description that will be good for your understanding. So that's how it works. Now, just this is the complete steps. Now let's try this in real time. So here I come to my Eclipse screen. From here I go to file. From file, go to new. From new, go to Maven project. Now in my case, the Maven project is available by default, so I go to that. If in your case it's not available, go to this project option. From here in type filter, you need to search for Maven. Once you have searched, you need to click the Maven project and that project will open. Now, I'll take the easiest way. From new, I'll go to the Maven project. And when I do this, as you have seen in the slides, you'll get this option, create a simple archetype. Just click here, do next. Now it asks you to enter the group ID. Now group ID, I said, it's just like the package name. So that's why I give the name in same way. Now artifact ID is the project name. So I'll name the project as TestNG project. Cool. Now these two, the names and descriptions, it's our choice. If you want to give some name, give it. I'll give TestNG. Description, here I'll give a description. I'm creating projects related to TestNG. Now just then click finish. And when you do this, you see in the bottom part, it says creating project TestNG and this project is built. And in the left side, you'll find a project created that is TestNG project. And just to differentiate between Java project and Maven project, now a small M is written just before the folder name. So that indicates that you are working on a Maven project. Now click this arrow button. When you click this project, you see by default you have these folders like src slash main slash java, src slash main slash resources, src slash test slash java, src slash test slash resources. Now the first two folders that's basically used by the developers. We will use these two folders, src slash test slash java, src slash test slash resources. This is basically for the testers. Now the most important part in the complete Maven project is this pom.xml file. Now, what this pom.xml file does. So just I was talking about some dependencies that every project needs to add some dependencies based on our requirement. So it's like if I need Selenium, I'll add the dependencies related to Selenium and TestNG because I'm implementing these two things in my project. So the dependencies that I'll be using, that dependencies I'll add in this pom.xml file. So this is how the XML file looks like. Now I'll talk in details about this XML file as well as dependencies in my next video. Let's skip it till here. So basically when we are using Maven project structure, here we are going to add dependencies. So we are not going to add manually the required jar files. Instead, we'll add dependencies. So just before adding the dependencies, let's understand about what is dependencies Maven project. So in context of Maven, a dependency is simply a jar file used for Java applications. So based on POM file, Maven will download and add the jar files to our Java path. Java will then be able to find and use the classes in jar file. So just you will get certain dependencies based on the tools that you are using. That dependencies will convert it to the jar files and that will be added to our project. So you can say a dependency is an external object or a library on which a Maven project depends for complication, build, and execution. So in Java, a dependency is usually a jar file that contains compiled code or other resources that are required for project. So usually you get these dependencies in its official website, that is Maven repository website. So these dependencies just act as a library where you will have your own jar files, and that's basically helpful for executing the programs. Now, pom.xml. So when you build a Maven project, you'll see pom.xml, a file is added. Usually it's added to the project by default. So in this XML file, basically it contains the information about the projects and configuration details used for Maven to build the project. So in Maven, the tags allows you to define and manage project-wide properties. So basically you will see just like the tags are used in HTML, in XML, same the tags are used. Inside these tags, we add our dependencies. So this dependency is one of the outside body, and inside this dependency bodies, we are going to add the dependencies one by one. We'll see this in project. So let's understand what is this dependencies. So it's a slight difference. Dependencies is the outer body. Inside this dependencies tag, the dependencies will add to our project one by one. So dependencies are seen a lot with POM and are an element under all plugin element blocks. So the dependencies have same structure and functions as that base build. So this dependencies I'll mark when I'll be adding the dependencies to our project. So this pom.xml, you can say it act as a supporting hand where you go add your dependencies and save those dependencies, and that helps to configure and basically build the project. That's all. Now steps to add dependencies. This is the repository. You have to go to this repository, search for that dependencies and add the dependencies accordingly. So in search bar, search for required dependencies. In case we required Selenium and TestNG related dependencies, so we'll search for these two dependencies and add in pom.xml file. Now, this is Maven repository. Open this Maven repository website. In this, Here, now, once the Maven repository website is open, here I'll search for Selenium Java. So search here for Selenium Java. So the first link is this Selenium Java. So when you click on this link, it takes you to different versions of Selenium. Now here you can go with the latest version, or you can go with an older version. So I'm going with a version that's a bit older than the latest one. So now I'll copy the dependencies from here, move to my Maven project. Here, I will add the dependencies. So now here, dependencies is the outer tag, or you can say the outer tag dependencies. So you see this dependency starts here and ends here. Now inside these dependencies, I will add the dependencies which I have copied. So from here, I have copied the dependency thing that is mentioned basically inside this section. So I have copied these dependencies from here and I'll paste it here. So this is for Selenium. Now the next one will be for TestNG. So this time I'll search for TestNG, and again I'll select a version of TestNG, and this time I'll copy the dependencies for TestNG. So now again I'll get the dependencies of TestNG here, copy them, paste it here. That's all. So right now to run a TestNG project, we need only two dependencies. One is for Selenium and the next one is for TestNG. And if you see, these dependencies comes inside the main dependencies tag. So that's what dependencies I was talking about. This is the outer body, and inside this we have the rest dependencies. So now just by doing this, after adding these dependencies, I just press Control S and the dependencies will add to my project by default. So here you will find in this project section, a folder will add that's named as Maven dependency. So in that folder, now you see this Maven dependency is added to my project. And if you check inside this Maven dependencies, you will find all the jar files available. So now this helps. This is how we build the dependencies. This is how we add the dependencies. And this is the jar files that added to our project by default. So that's how we configure the dependencies, and that's how we use the Maven project, the pom.xml in Maven project. This is all in this video. Now we have configured our project. Now we'll start using it accordingly. Now, annotation is one of the features that's added in TestNG, and you can say that's one of the most important feature that makes it different from JUnit. So annotation in TestNG is basically that feature where you have different types of annotations. So first, let's understand what TestNG annotation is. So TestNG annotations are used to describe the batch code in a program to maintain the flow of code and generate the test status. So special syntax that uses symbols like annotation is frequently followed by the name of the annotations and any associated parameters. So annotations can be used among other things to specify configuration, information, documents, code, active or disable particular behavior, or mark code for further processing. So these annotations, what you talk about, these annotations basically helps us to configure or provide informations to our code. So now there are different types of annotations that you will come across, but the most commonly used annotations here is before and after annotation. So for every test case, you have an annotation as before and after, and just go with the name. Before means assigning system settings where you want to execute something before a test case is, like opening the website, setting the path of the driver, open web browsers. This you usually do before writing a test case. So that's before annotation. So it goes with the name before test. Again, the test annotation comes in between, and at last after annotations where you usually close the drivers and all. So that's the sequence: before annotation, then test annotation, and then after annotation. Still, you have some more annotations to go, and this is the sequence of annotations. That means you have 4 before annotations and 4 after annotations. Now, if you see, the sequence here is before suite comes first, before class comes second, before method comes third, and before test comes at last. So this before annotations you have. Now you'll say that what's the use of having these many before annotations? It's like just we are opening the drivers and just we are setting the path of the driver so that we can do in one before annotations. But in real time scenarios, you'll come across the Excel sheets, you'll have more informations to add, and you want that those informations to should be available to you before the execution of these steps. So in that case, these annotations will also help. Now, the sequence of opening annotation is this, and the closing is just opposite to that. That means if you have before test and before suit in same class, then in that case, before test annotation will close first, and that is after test, and then the before suit, that is after suit. So this is the sequence of execution of annotations. Now, if you know more about these annotations, so it's mentioned here in before suit, the annotated methods will run before all tests in the suits have run. So that means it's the first one that will run before all the test cases. And always remember the test case is in between. That means the test case will execute only after this before annotations. Now after suit, the annotation will close when all the tests in the suits have run. Same goes with before test. The annotation method will run before any test method belong to the class inside the test tag is run after test. So basically, if you read its definition and you see before and test, it's trying to say that before class, the annotated method will run before the first test method is current in class is provoked. After class, the annotation method will run after all the test methods in the current class has been run. Now again, when you come about before method, the annotated method will run before each test method, and then after method, the annotated method will run after each test method. Now you have two more annotations, that is before groups and after groups, that I have not mentioned. There is the list of groupings that this configuration method will run before. This method is guaranteed to run shortly before the first test case that belongs to any of this group invoked. So before group is basically, it's a section before executing the group of test cases. If you want to execute a section, it goes inside before group. And after group, the list of groups that this configuration method will run. Basically, once the test cases is run, this method is guaranteed to run shortly after the last test method that belongs to any of this group is invoked. So usually you'll come across groupings where you will see that how you are grouping the multiple test cases. So in that case, before group will execute before the grouping execution starts, and after group will execute once the grouping execution is done. So these are the different annotations that you will come across, and we'll be using these annotations to our best uses based on the requirement. But you need to know what are the different types of annotations, and just we will use few annotations and you'll get an idea that okay, what exactly we are pitching inside this annotation and what exactly we are putting it outside the before annotation. So by one example, I think the all concepts of before annotations will be clear. So how to do the implementation of this annotations? So what I'm going to do is, like, I've already written few test cases. So I've written one as test one. So this is one of the test case. This has test two. That's another test case. Now before method, after method, again before class. So all these before and after classes I have written here, and along with that I have written the print statement just to define the sequence. So I mentioned in the last video that it follows a specific sequence, that before the before annotations, first few before annotations will execute first, then first next for after annotations will execute. That's how it goes. Now when I run this code, then you see the steps here. So here it's first before suit working, then before test executing, then before class executing, then comes before method. And once it comes to before method, it execute the first test case. And as the test case is executed, the after method closes here itself. Now, because you have another test case, so again, before method starts here, again, that test case is executed, then the after method is executed, and then again after class. So what means here is that if you have multiple test cases, So before method will apply before that test case. So usually before method is every time a method is run or a test case is run, that particular method will execute. And then after class, after test, and the last one is after suite. So by this, it's quite clear that this declaration, the default test declaration, is inside the suite section. And in default suite, all the. So basically we have two test cases. So the test report for this test cases are only two. So that means these annotations are just the helping hand to our test cases that helps to add the steps before the execution of test case. So these annotations will not generate test status. It's just that we are adding few steps before a test cases. So that's the difference here. So test status will only generate for test cases. Now, if you pick this program, which we have already done, the login priority program, so this section, what we can do is this section, instead of pushing the test annotation, this section, we can put it inside before test. So this setup basically goes inside before test. Now I'm taking the real-time example. So instead of creating new one, I'm just changing the current one. And this one, I put it based on the priorities, priority 1 and 2. And then at last, I'll write one more test cases where I'll say create a method and I'll say public void teardown. And in this method, just I'll write browser object dot close. And just before you wrote, and here we'll write after test annotation. So it's the best example to know that in which scenario basically we are using before test and after test. Now this section where I'm just setting the path of driver, I open the website. We don't need the test report for this section. So that's why we have put it inside before test. The main section of the test report is this too, where exactly we are passing the test values. And after that, we are doing the logit process. So these two status are important, not the very first and last one. So just I save this. And now when I run this, it will execute the same way. Just the scene is here. This will go inside before test. Now, next time when I'll be writing a test case, then straight away I'll just be adding a test case below instead of writing the step again and again. I'll just be adding one test case below, and this open and close, these things will execute same for every test case. That's all. And that's how it makes things easier. Now, if I run this test case, you see, it's going to work as another code. So that before test helps to execute those details of the drivers and all, and the test annotations will do its task accordingly. So that's how we implement the before test and after test in real-time programs as well. So in this video, you have seen how those all annotations are working, the sequence you have seen that we have already described before, as well as implementation in real-time program also you have seen. So now here the test report you see, it's like it's generating only two test reports. Now, this is one of the most important concepts that you'll come across in TestNG, that's data provider. So before understanding data provider, let's understand what this concept is. It's a data-driven test. So data-driven testing is important because it saves time and separates logic from data. Time is saved when we create one test method and not multiple test method. So data-driven testing, it's like for one test case, you are using multiple data. That means for a single test case, multiple data is added. And that's called data-driven testing. So you don't need to write multiple test cases for a single data. Just keep on passing multiple data for a single test case, and that particular test case will execute with that multiple data. So the test method logic is separate from each data, and also the logic part. Yeah, the logic part of the test case will also be separate. It will not be inside that method itself. So the test method logic is separate for each method sets, allowing it to execute different data combinations for same test. Therefore, we leverage one test methods and multiply data sets. Here's data-driven testing process follow. So the complete story is just write the logic separate and apply that logic to one test case and executes it multiple times. Now data providers, basically the TestNG data providers provides only one single attribute, which is the name of data provider. That means we use data provider annotations, and to that data provider we pass the name of the data provider method, and then data provider is applied. Now the annotated method, we must return an object of array where object can be assigned the parameter list of test methods. So basically in data provider, always you return object of array, and that also multi-dimensional array. So the return type of every data provider test case will be object of array. That's the return type. Now, then the third thing, data provider in TestNG is another way to provide values to test in parameters in test functions. So this comes inside test functionality and in functionality test. And in this case, basically, it's another way to provide values to a test case to run a particular test case. The method then performs a data-driven test for each value that you have specified. So basically this method, the data-driven method that we are going to create, that method will perform the data-driven test for each value. So it's like we have more than one value, so it will perform data-driven test for each value. That's the story of data provider. And that's why we use data provider here is to run a test case using multiple values. That's all. You have annotation in TestNG, we'll use that annotation, we'll run a test case, and we'll see how that thing is executing. So we'll apply this concept in one of the program, the login program itself, and see how that data provider is applied and just understand through a real-time example. So we'll apply data provider in the same website, that is the IIT 361. So for this, in TestNG, when you do right click and go to TestNG section, there is an option that is create TestNG class. So here you can name the class as data provider. And you see annotation is present here by default, that's data provider. Is it already exist? Okay, so I'll give some other name, new TestNG, and I'll give the name only as data. And I'll take this annotation data provider and do finish. So in this case, you see by default, a data provider method is created with the return type as object of array. So this says that data provider only takes the return type as object of array. As usual, I'll create a method as verify. And here in this method, I'll pass those steps like set the path of driver, website link. These steps we will add it here. And also I'll define the Chrome driver separately as browser object. Now the next thing. Here in this, we'll write the steps for the test cases. That is the login process. After that, I'll write here the next method, that is logout. So for logout, now I'll take the logout section from here. That is this. And I'll paste it over here. The first one will be my priority one. So I'll write that. And because this is a data provider, So now this, you see, this is the data provider method DP. So here I will enter first the username, a valid username, that is this. Again, a valid password. Again, here I will enter again a username and password that's not valid. Now this method returns object of array. That means this will return me first the username that I'll fetch it here. Second, the password that I'll fetch. Now instead of passing the values manually, I'll pass this here. So I'll pass these values here. Now let's save this and run this test case. So basically in Dataprovider here you see the return type is object of array. So it will take the values in form of array. And as well as here we are applying Dataprovider and the name of method, that is DB. So based on this details what I have passed, it will take the username, it will take the password. And when I run the test case here, you see the complete process will run multiple times. So if you see here, so this particular test case will run. First time it will run with the first credentials, and second time it will run with the second credentials. So that's how the test cases will execute over here. So this is for the first test case where you have entered the username. Basically we are doing login for that. Now it's for the second one where you are not passing valid. So basically two multiple test cases are for one test cases we are passing multiple values and the complete process is executing twice. That's what Dataprovider provides us, and that's why we use Dataprovider in TestNG. So next time I passed the wrong username and password, so I'm not able to log in. So that's the complete story of a Dataprovider. So for one test case, we are passing multiple values and multiple values are passing over here. So that's how the Dataprovider works, and that's how we pass the values in Dataproviders. That's all in this video. Thank you. So till now we have seen how the test annotations are working and how the test cases are executing. Now here, priority is one of the important concepts that helps to set the priority of the test cases. Now how that works, we'll see that. So first let's understand the definition of priority. So priority is an attribute that tells TestNG will provide the which order the test needs to follow. This works in case we have multiple test cases and you want to execute in particular sequence. So this priority keywords helps to maintain the sequence using test annotations. So basically you can say here the sequence of test code executions are maintained. Now here we define the sequence in parameters and the values are passed in form of numbers. So this is how it looks like. This is the syntax of basically setting the priorities of the test cases. Now why to use this thing? Usually when we run multiple test cases using test annotation, then in that case, by default, the test case executes. So this will affect the test case execution in any process. So what happens if you have multiple test case, then in that case, when you run the same test case again and again using test annotation, then in that case, it just picks a random test case and it executes. So if you have written methods in a proper sequence, it's not going to execute the test case in sequence. So in this case, we need to maintain the sequence, and to maintain the sequence, we need this priority keywords and pass the value in parameters based on the value the test case will execute. That's the small story. So in short, to maintain the sequence, we use priority. Now, so here, this is a diagram where it shows how the priority is working. So in one of this, I've set the priority as 3, 0, and 7. So that means the lowest priority value that you have passed, that will execute first, then the second one, and at last the third one. So usually we give the numbers in sequence, but if in case someone gives the number, if it gives a random numbers that is not in sequence, so remember the lowest value will execute first, then again the next one in sequence, and at last the lowest one. So that's how the complete scenario is. Now let's try this thing in real time. So here let's create a normal class. So I'm going to create a normal class because I'm going to add the test annotation methods and all. So that will be helpful here. So I write priority test. Now we don't use this public static void main. Straight away we'll create a class. Now in this class, I'm going to create a method where I'll just try to open a simple website that is Amazon site. So I'll write a test case here where I'm going to open the Amazon site. Now you see the browser object I have defined inside the method, and I'm going to use this browser object in every method. So what I have to do, I have to define this thing outside the method so that it will be available for all. So I've defined this thing outside the method using WebDriver, and this name browser object, or basically this reference that I've created for WebDriver, that will be available for all method. So here I have one test case. So this seems to be easy to run. Let me create one more test case. So I'll copy the same from here, and below I'll create one more test case, and I'll just change the website link. That's all. I'm making it very simple right now. In next example, we'll see the implementation in real time. In one of the login code, I'll try to run this thing. So here I change the website name to Google site, and instead of passing the Amazon website, I pass the Google website. And also here, we need to change the driver location, that is this. So in every case, the driver location will be this. So it's a very simple code. I don't think we need much to discuss on this. It's like I've created two methods, where in one I'm opening the Amazon website. In second one, I'm opening the Google website. That's all. And in third one, I'll open the Twitter website. So it's like in three different test cases, we are opening three different websites. So let me create one more test case the similar way. And it's very important to understand, because this test cases will help you to understand why this priority thing is needed. Okay. And this time I'll pass the website link here as twitter.com. So now you have three test cases here, and these three test cases are opening three different websites. That's all. Let's save it and run it for the very first time. So now here you have two options, either run all, or if you want to run some particular test case, then go for that test case and run it from there. So I want to run all the test cases. So I'll just say run all. So now you see, first it will open the Amazon one. Next time it will open the Google one. And again, it will open the last one. That's basically the Twitter one. So it's opening three different websites. Let's see the output again. So let's run all the test cases again. So now I press on run all, and now you see all the test cases will run one by one. So first it opens the Amazon one. Next time it will open the Google website, and at last it will open the Twitter website. So now from here, you will say everything is working fine. So why to use priorities? If everything is working fine, why to use priority? We have run 3 test cases, everything passed properly. Now I'll do a small changes here and that will help you to understand the complete concept. Now this is the first test case. So I'll cut the test case from here and bring it to the last in sequence. Now let's save this and run this test case again. Now the first one is Google website in sequence, but still you see Amazon open first. So what happens? By default, it picks the last output and gives me the output accordingly. So that's the problem with test annotation when you are using it without the priority things or without using that keyword. So by default, it takes the sequence, the one that we executed before. So just to make this run in proper sequence, so after test annotation, you'll give these parameters, you will write this keyword and give the sequence number. So I give the sequence number this way. The first one I keep as sequence number 3. Second one I keep that sequence number as 2. Sorry, in fact, I'll keep it as 1. And the last one I'll keep it as 2. So now this means that wherever you write the test cases, just go change the sequence number and that particular test case will execute. That's all. And nothing you have to do. So just you have to maintain the sequence number and that particular sequence will execute. Now, so remember the first one is Twitter, second sequence is Amazon, and third is Google. Now let's run it again. So based on this sequence, now first opens Twitter, second opens the Amazon, and third it will open the Google page. So that's how the test case is working. So that's what the difference priority brings. And that's why we need to use this keyword to maintain the sequence of test case. Now all the test case passed, and this is how we maintain the sequence. I hope through this example, the concept of priority is quite clear and how we are using it. I hope this is clear with this example. So this is how we execute the test case in a proper sequence. So in the last example, just you check that how the priority thing is working, but let's apply this on some particular website and see how it's working. Now we'll use this test cases and it will be a common test case for all the cases. Like in case of priorities in dependencies, I'll be using the some common test case. And the reason is very simple. It's like at least you'll get an idea that, okay, in this case, we use the priority this way. In the next case, the same concept we are using in different way. So first what we have to do, we have to open the website link, enter the username, the password, and click the submit button, then click the logout image, and then click the logout button. Now this is our test cases. So we'll write code based on these test cases. So first what you do, now let's understand this thing manually as well. So manually you come here, you click the login button, you enter the username, you enter the password, like I entered the username, then I entered the password. And do login. And after that, we go to the logout button and then we press logout here. That's how we do. Now here in case of TestNG, we need to figure it out that which test will write inside which method. So here knowingly that open the website link is one method or one test case. Again, click the login image, enter the username, password, and the submit button. So this is basically these 3 steps are the login process. So we'll create a separate method for this. And then for logout, we'll create a separate method. So what we are going to do, we are going to create separate method for all the 3 process. Now let me first create a class here in this package and name this class as login priority. Do finish. Now first we'll create a method, name it as void or write it as public a void open, or I can say setup. So in this setup method, what I'm going to do is, in this setup method, we are going to add the first few steps where we pass the website links, and in fact we create an object of the driver. So those first few steps, that's quite common in every case, we are going to add those steps here. Now this Chrome driver will define it outside the method, so that this Chrome driver we are going to use in every method, so we'll define it here. Now import this Chrome driver. Cool. So here in the first method, we have just done the setup, and we will use this annotation test as well because we are applying TestNG. Now import this as well. Now next method again I'll create where I'll say void verify. So in this verify method, I'm going to write the steps for like click login button, image, then enter the username, password, and all. So because it's the first test case, so I'm writing the steps here, like web element, username. I give the username. Now these things we have already talked about in Selenium. So I assume that these things are quite known to all of you. So here in username, again, I'll just write browser object dot find elements by dot. Now I'll go back to the website, and first I'll just check the login section. I do inspect, and here I find this ID login label. So I'll take this ID here. Now these things are already defined or explained in Selenium. So you'll find it easy if you go and watch that video and then again come back here. So these steps will be easy for you because I'm doing the same thing. But here what we are doing is we are putting it inside the methods. So this was for a login click, login image. So here I'll just put login image. Now same I'll do for the username. So I write web element username is equals to browser object dot find elements by. Now I'll go and find for the username. So I do click, go to the username, right click here, do inspect. Now I'll take the ID for username as well from here, by dot ID, and this is for username. Done. Now using username, call the send keys, and in send keys pass the value demo12. Now next one again web element, and this will be for password. So I write browser object dot find element by. By dot ID, and in ID I pass the username. That's all. Now using pass, I'll send the values test 1 2 3 4 5 6 $. Fine. So this is for username. The last one goes for submit button. Now I'm writing it in proper way so that we'll be using it same. So next time I'll just use this code. I'll not write it again. So at least you'll get an idea that how I am going for it. So this time I'll go for this login. So I do right click and again I inspect and I go for the submit button. Again, the name here I'm using this dot name submit. Now at the last I do sub dot click. So these all steps comes inside the login process. Now again I'll apply test annotation here. Now this is for login. After this comes the next method. So I'll create a next method where I'll say public void logout process, the method name. And inside this method, now I'll write for logout as well. So the test cases for logout was first the logout image. So as usual, I'll take the details of that method. So here, let me enter the username and password and get to the logout page. Now this is how we usually proceed to our test cases, and this is how we write and do login. Now after this here, this is the logout button. So I do right click, I do inspect. This is the image, and I know that here we don't have any of these locators available. So I'll do copy XPath. So I go to copy, I copy XPath and put the XPath value here. Now this will click the logout image. Now next one, once the logout image is clicked, then we go to the logout option, that is this. Do right click, do inspect, and this is the logout image. So I do copy XPath. So here I write again web element logout click is equals to browser object dot find elements by dot XPath logout click dot click method. Now here I'll apply test annotation as well. Now I've written a different test cases for all the three different scenarios. Here, now just to perform the test cases in proper schedule. So I have to apply priority because you have already seen that if you don't do this, then what happens? So I have to apply priority here. And this time for the third one. So now if I have maintained these numbers sequence, and if I run the test case, it will run in proper sequence. So that's what the user priority here is. So when I click this run as, so this will open the website and it will give you the expected output. So it enters the username. Again, it's here the username and password. We have to pass the username and password. Now this is taking time because it says one failure, two skips. Why is it so? Now you will come across these problems. It's good that you have come across this problem. It's because you have not applied the implicity weight here. So we need to apply implicity weight, and that's why we apply this implicity weight by default. So I say browser object dot manage dot timeouts dot implicity weight, and here you have to pass time as well as time minutes dot seconds. Now once you have applied this implicity weight to your test case, and then again you run this case, then now you see this thing will execute. Now I hope you are familiar with the concept of implicity weight. So now again the same website it opens, you see. Now this will take some time. It will click the login button. Now you see the username and password is passed over here and we are able to log in. At the same case, we go to the logout button and click the logout button and logged out. So this is how the priority works in real-time example. and the implicit wait is also needed that I missed in the beginning. So I say that by default, don't forget to add the implicit wait. So this is a real-time example for priorities, and this is how it executes. Now, last time we saw how the priority is working and how it helps to set the sequence, but the dependency is also a keyword that's used to maintain the sequence of test case. Now you'll say, what's the need of having two different options for the same task? Because already we have one priorities. Why to go for dependencies? So we'll see that difference. We'll execute this complete concept in the same example and we'll see the difference why this is required. In reference to priority, why this dependency is required and why we need it. First, let's understand what this dependency is. So test dependency is a feature in TestNG that allows test cases to be dependent on multiple or single test case. So this is a feature that allows test case to be dependent. So here a test case is dependent on certain test case. And in that case, it was based on the number sequence that we are providing. Now using this keyword depends on method attribute within test annotation, we can specify the name of parent test method on which the test should be dependent. So here two things are required. One is parent test case and the other one is child. So the child test case, basically there we mention that to which parent test case it's dependent. Now a few points to remember here is to execute all the test case, we need to execute the parent test case and then the dependent method. So here we need to execute the parent, and if in case we don't do that, by default the parent test case will execute and then run the dependent one. In case, now the third point is important, in case the parent method fails, then the dependent method will not run and the method will marked as skipped. So that's the difference here. So if the parent test case fails, then that means the child test case will not execute and that will be marked as skip. Now let's do this in real time. So here I'm going with same example. Instead of creating a new one, it's better that you follow the same example and try to understand the difference. So I just create a new class with name as dependency class. And you see always with this, I'm adding class because these dependencies may be the keyword in TestNG. Now I copy the same code. No difference. I'll copy the same code here, paste it over here. Now just here, in case of adding this priorities number, now what I have to do is I have to keep one test case as parent test case. So this one I keep it as parent test case. Now in other one I'll write the keyword that is depends on method, and there I will mention to on which method is dependent. It's dependent on open Google site. Depends on methods. So this is the keyword that we use, and I mentioned the parent class that is dependent on. Now same way in the third test case, I'll write the same keyword, and this time here I'll pass the second test case, that is Twitter site. So here Google site, the Twitter one is dependent on Google and the Amazon one is dependent on Twitter. So now here the first test case I have not written any dependencies. That means that becomes my parent test case. Now see the difference. First is parent and next two are child. And again, that's the sequence. Now if you run this test case, right now if you run this test case will run in same way as the priority one was working. So you'll not find any difference here. So just do run all and you see. First it's open Google, then it opens Amazon, and then it opens Twitter and then Amazon. So the sequence is maintained here. So basically the sequence is maintained here. So now why to go for dependencies? You see, I get the same test report, everything. Now the difference here I'll show you. Let's do a mistake intentionally. Like I'm just making this website link http www.google.com. So what happens here? Here we come up with some error. Now you run the same test case and see what happens. So when you run the same test case, the first website, Google, it's not opening. Sorry, basically it takes the Google because that's basically that it takes the HTTP as well. So we have to do some other mistake here. So let me pass something that's may affect, like it takes HTTPS. Okay, I removed www from here. Let me do this mistake. And now let's see what happens. Still it's opening the Google. Now that's the problem with the Google website. It opens in every case. So here, let me do some other thing. So yeah, here I did a small changes. Instead of making it google.com, I made it go. So this is not a valid website link. So it's obviously that this particular test case will not pass. Now let me run this and see. So when I run this, you see, it's not opening. So that means the website is not opening here. Now it tried multiple times, but it's not giving any valid output. So that means this is a error. Now what do you have to do in this case? Nothing. Now let's go and check the console window. So here it says because the first test case failed and the second was dependent on the first, so the second test case skipped, and the third one was dependent on the second one, so that also got skipped. So that means if first test case is creating problem, if first one failed, the next two get skipped by default. So that's the good thing about dependency is that dependencies works in this case, like where one test case is dependent on other. So if the test case to which is dependent, if that pass, then only the next test case will execute. So just for example, if you are able to log in, then only you will be entered to do, or then only you can do some test cases inside that website. If you are not able to log in, then in that case, the next test case by default will skip. So in that scenario, this dependency will work fine. So I hope the difference between priority and dependency is quite clear. That in case of priorities, if you have error in any test case, that will not matter the next test case. But in this case, it will matter. That's the slight difference, and that's the reason behind we have two different ways to maintain the sequence. We will use these based on our requirement. Where dependency is required, I will add dependencies. Where priority is required, I will add priorities. So the same example we have applied in priorities, and the same test case, same examples we are applying in dependencies. Now we are doing this because just to keep that point clear, that what's the difference between priority and dependency. So I'm not taking new examples, I'm taking the older examples so that you can easily relate with that. You can relate with the example and you can understand the concept. So you can try multiple of examples, but it's very important to understand the concept, and it will be easy to understand when you try the same example. So this time, in my last video, I have wrote this example. I have wrote all the steps here. um, just by doing every steps, I have written all the steps here. Now in this case, I'm going to copy the same code. So if you see in dependency class, I've copied the same code that is in login priority. I've copied the same thing. And not this one. This is a simple the example that we did before. Now we will create a login dependency class and we'll copy login dependency class. And here I'll copy the complete step, everything from the login clarity, the same thing, because the complete process will be same. Just what changes here is the keywords. That's all. So here I make this as a parent, knowing that setup is the one that's the first thing to execute, because this will help you to open the drivers, in fact, the websites. So that's the very first thing you need to execute. So that we will keep it as parent. Next one I'll write depends on methods is equals to, and in double quotes I'll pass the method here. There is this. Save with the logout process. All right. Depends on methods is equals to, and here I'll pass the verify method. Now, this is our main method. This is our next method. So just this changes we have to do and run the test case. So it will give us the same output that we got in case of priority. So the output will not matter here. Just you'll have everything same. Just the keyword matters. That's all. Now let me run all the test cases. And see, it's working. So it clicks the login button as usual. After that, you'll enter the username. After that, you'll enter password and then do login. Same way. Click the logout button and you are logged out. Everything is similar. So just assume that in this case, if you do a mistake here, that means here now all the three test cases are passing. So if you do a mistake with your username and then run the test case, so in that case, how will it execute? So in this case, you see, we are not able to log in. And if you see the test report, it says one pass, one failure, the one that failed, and one skip. So basically, you're not able to log in. So dependency works in such case that if you enter any wrong credentials, so by default, the next steps will be stopped. That means you can't move to the next step. In fact, that steps will not be executed. So what happens there? If there is one failure, the next step straight away skips. So it's not a failure. In fact, it skipped. So it's clear to me that because this one step, this one method failed here, the second method failed because of the next steps are not executing. That's the beauty of dependency, and that's how we apply in real-time project. Now, basically this group is used in TestNG to group the test cases, the classes, the methods. So we use grouping for that. So in this example, we'll see basically an example where we are trying to group the test cases, a simple example as well as a real-time example. So you'll get an idea of both how exactly we are doing that and how we do in the real time as well. Before going through that, let's understand what is TestNG. So TestNG what's group in TestNG? So TestNG allows you to separate different test cases into different groups and call them inclusively by using XML file. So here, one new thing comes into use is XML file. Now, this XML file is a place where basically we define our test cases separately. Now, this is something new that's added to TestNG, where you can easily define your process, or basically you can define your groups of test cases separately. So groups in TestNG denotes that the process of grouping different tests together into a straight forward group and running these test cases together by just running the group in single command. So just we will will provide a name in form of group to every test cases, and that we will run in single command that we will see. We'll run just one single line of command in XML, and that will help you to run the test cases. TestNG also allows us to group test inside groups, which we discussed in later section of this tutorial. So grouping saves us from defining many classes in our tests in our source code and then running the classes separately, resulting in avoiding the wastage of time. So this situation also helps us in preventing the recompilation of test cases again and again according to our needs. So groups with examples. So we don't want to define test cases separately in different class depending upon the functionality. So in which scenarios basically you are going to use groups. These are the different scenarios. So when you don't want to define test methods separately in different classes, like you have different in different classes you have different methods, and instead of defining it separately you want to define it in one. So in that cases you can group the test cases. At the same time wants to ignore some test cases as if they do not exist in the code. So you have some around 10 test cases, and out of that you want to run just 6 of them and the rest 4 you want to ignore it. So just like to save time or just to check the portion or the section which is quite required, we use the groups here. So we can group those test cases, the one that we want to run, which one we don't. So there we can also use this thing, basically the group concept. So to carry out this, we have to group them. This is done by using the include and exclude mechanism supported in TestNG. So two keywords are there. One is called as include and other one is called as exclude. And these two helps to group the test cases, like including the test cases and excluding the test cases. It goes with the name. And these all details we define in XML. So you see, you'll find it very easy. It's a very easy process. Just for example, this is my program, okay? So here what I've done, I've just taken 4 different test cases. Now the important section is this. So these are 4 different test cases with different method names. Now what I've done here is a keyword I'm using is that's named as groups. Groups is the keyword here. And I gave a name to this group. Now here I've given the name as login. So a name I have given login, and you see to these 3 methods I have given the same name. So it means that methods with this name login will be grouped, and the one with name as explore will not be grouped. That means when you pass the group name as login, these 3 test cases will run, and when you put the test cases a group name as explore, then only this one will work. So this is the scenario. So based on our requirement, we group our test cases with these names, and these names go with the test annotation in a bracket, like as it is mentioned here. Now the next step, that's the most important step, what I was talking about, the XML. So go to that particular package, or you know that this particular class, group test class, you're trying to create group for this particular class. So just go there, right click, go to TestNG and write convert to TestNG. Now, when you do this, here usually this XML name you need to keep changing. First time it's testng.xml. So I like to keep it as it is. So it's fine, you can keep this name. But next time if you're using the same XML file, then change the name. Now here, just do finish. Now, once you do this, you see a testng.xml file is built here. So I'll go to this section. And here you see basically the name of class is mentioned. So basically, it's clear that in this particular class, I'm going to apply group. And just to group the test cases, inside this group tags, I'm going to use a tag as, again, inside the run tag, I'll write the tag name as include. Now, when you write, these all things are auto-generated, so don't worry about it. It comes by itself, just you write and it will be available. Now here you have to give the name of group, the one that you want to execute. So now when you run this test case, when you do right click and go to run as, and then you see the methods with name as login will run. So you have only 3 test cases with name as login. You see, these are the 3 test cases with name login. So these 3 test cases will pass. The 4th one is not executing. So it means groups with name as explore is not working because I have not mentioned it here. Now, instead of include, if I write here exclude, so instead of include, if I write exclude, so this time you see what happens. Only the one with explore will work. That means I have excluded all the test cases with the name as login. I hope it's quite clear with this thing that how exactly the grouping is working and how it looks like. Now in real-time process here, now I was talking about a real-time example. So I'm taking the most common example that we do, that is group login. So here, this we have tried before in many of the programs. Still, I will tell you the what exactly we are doing. We are here. I have written code for the login process. I click this login button, enter the username, enter the password, and then click the login button. That's what we are doing. So the same code. Now this code you have used it before as well. We have seen in different examples. I've been using this code. I'm using the same one here. Just what I've done here in before. I'm using the before class again, test annotations, and again the next one I have mentioned as group. So I've added one test cases here where I'm trying to compare the dashboard, and if the dashboard this test cases fails. So what I'm doing here is I have written one group is equals to dash. So when I write group is equals to dash, that means it's compulsory that this one will execute. So what I'm going to do here is, so if I want to group them, I'll write with the same name, group is equals to, or I'll just write group is equals to login. That's all. Now here, let me create a XML file for this. Now you see, it's a very good scenario. It's like here you'll get the clear explanation of what exactly is happening. So it says new test case. No, I'm not creating a new test class. So I go to this group login. I do right click. I go to TestNG. From TestNG, I go to convert to TestNG. And this time I will change the name of this XML file to login testng.xml and do finish. Now you see here the scenario is one is based on priorities, and I have mentioned as group is equals to login. The next one I have mentioned as group is equals to dash, and third one I have done nothing. That means I have not mentioned any group names. That's all. Now I'll straight away go to the XML file, login testng.xml, and here I will write groups, and inside groups I'll write the run tag. Now inside the run tag I will use include, and in include I'll mention the name of group as login. Now you see, you'll say that you are giving the login name everywhere in the group. It's not that. Just I'm going with any name. Now this name of the group can be anything. It's like you give login, you give logout, whatever name you like, or you want to give execute. See, it's just random names that I'm taking it. So it's just a name that you give, and that name you have to mention it here. That's only important. So I've just mentioned here as login. So here you see the outcome. Let's go through the complete process. Maybe I have to do some changes with the drivers just to check. So now let's see the outcome, what exactly happens when we run the test cases. And here we have two different groups. If you see, one group is for login, that goes with the verify, that is the login process. Other one is dashboard, that goes with the check dashboard. That's how the process is. Now I do right click here. I do run as and click on TestNG. Now you see I have three methods here. One is verify, second one is the check dash, and the last one is search courses. And in this XML file, I have mentioned only the test cases with the name as login will work. So here in C, the first one is one with the verify. So this one is executing. And the last one, the one that's not mentioned with any group name, that one is not executing. So I hope the concept is quite clear from here that if you mention whichever test case name you mention, that will execute along with the one that's set with the priorities, that will execute. So the one that you have not mentioned with the group name, that will not go anyhow. So that's the story of grouping here, and that's how we group the test cases in TestNG. So the group name is always important. Now here you can play with include and exclude the way you like based on the requirements. Here just went through include, showing you that two different group names are there, but still it's executing based on the process. It's like it's executing. You can say just based on this thing, based on the group names. So if it's login, the one that execute, the one without any group name that also execute, but the one with a different group name will not execute anyhow. So that's the small story of grouping in with a simple example and in real time. Now this is one of the most important section in TestNG that's called as listeners. So in this listeners, what exactly we do? So in this listeners will help to generate a report at every stage of testing. Now I'll tell you, in TestNG, a listener is an interface that allows you to customize the test execution behavior. So TestNG provides several listeners that you can implement to perform actions at different stage to test execution lifecycle. So at different stage, if you want to generate certain message or report, there you will be using listeners. Listeners are particularly useful for tasks such as logging, reporting, taking screenshots, handling test failures, or setting up and tearing down test environments. So basically, this can help you for login, for reporting. If you want the screenshots, there you can generate. Usually, when the test case fails, then there you can generate the screenshots. So you have methods for that. In fact, you can help it for handling the test failures. So in different scenarios, this listener provides different method, and it's an interface. So obviously an interface will contain only the methods. So that's what listener do. A test list ng listener is a Java class that implements one or more interface provided by TestNG. So it's like if the listener is an interface, so that means if there are more than one listeners, we can implement multiple listeners in one Java class. So that's the story of lister. Basically, it's an interface that contains different method which helps to define the execution behavior of a test case. Now, these are certain different types of listeners: ITest listener, ISuite listener, IExecution listener, IInvokedMethod listener. So we'll see the uses of each and every listeners one by one in our upcoming videos. So just right now here, we have just talked about the listeners. Now we'll implement these listeners and see how it's working. So now here, ITest listener in TestNG is an interface that provides a way to listen to events occurring during the test execution of lifecycle. So ITest listener is one of the listeners, one of the interface you can say, and among different listeners, one of the listener is ITest listener, and we use this listener very often. So it's very important to know what exactly the methods are inside this and how it occurs. So it allows you to perform actions on implemented custom logic based on various events such as test start, test success, test failure, test skip, etc. So it says that based on the logics, if you want to add some message or if you want to add some events, so that you can add. And different scenarios like test start, test success, test failure, in these different scenarios, you can add a message. Now, these are certain methods that you'll come across in iTest Listener, like on test start, on test success, on test failure, on test skipped, on test failed with success percentage, on test failed with timeout, on start, on finish. So you see these methods, if you go through these methods, if you go through name of these method, it's talking about every stage of test case. That means when a test case starts, you can generate a report. When test case success, you can generate a report. If a test case is a failure, you want to add some event, you can add it there. Again, on test, on start, that means when the particular process starts, then you can generate some message. On finish, you can generate some message. So these are the different methods that you'll come across in iTest Listener. And because iTest Listener is an interface, so these methods are inbuilt. That means it's there from beforehand. So now, Here, this is the class. Basically, let me create a fresh class for this. Now, already we have a group login that we have used for grouping the test case. So we'll apply this in listener. We'll apply this ITest listener to this particular class. Now here I'll create a new class and name the class as ITest listener class. So this is a random class, and to this class I implement ITest listener. Now I'll import this ITest listener, and when you go to the declaration of this ITest listener, you see all these test cases are available here. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply these test cases to this ITest listener class. So these are the different test cases that you'll come across. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add these methods here. Now I know that these are different methods and you have to use all of these 8 methods. You can't skip anyone. You can't say that, okay, I'll use this, I'll not use that, because it's an interface, and you know in interface it's compulsory to use all methods. Now here you see on finish, I have just put a message that when a test case start, I'll get a message. Again, on test failed, I'll get a message that, okay, the test case failed. So I put a printout statement here. On test skipped, I have put a printout statement. And when the test starts and when text is success, you'll have print statement. So on start, on finish, on start, if you want, I can put a print statement here as well, saying that the test execution started. Great. So now this is the ITest listener class. This is how we create. Now here right now I'm putting the print statements just to show you how it's working. In real time case, like here, when you'll be doing like on test failure, maybe you will add the screenshots just to generate that, okay, knowing that, okay, at this point it failed, so I'm adding a screenshot here. On test skip, maybe you will ask a skip related that, okay, this particular test case. So basically here I'm mentioning which particular test case skipped, and based on the nature of the test case, these methods will execute. Now let's understand how. So just to run this listener, now listener is a thing that's different than what we are doing in normal classes. So for this also we have to create XML. So remember, for listener, we'll create XML. For grouping the test cases, we'll create an XML. Now I'll name the XML here as ITest listener and do finish. Now when I do this, what happens? In ITest listener.xml, you see all the classes are feeded here. All the classes inside TestNG package, because I've created the listener inside this package, the XML for this particular package. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all my classes and just keep one that is group login. That's one class. I'll keep it here and rest I'll remove it. Now, in case of groups, we used to add the groups below the test case. In case of listeners, we are going to add the listener before suits. So here I will use a listener tag, and inside this listener tag, I will use listener. So in this listener, I have to give the description. Now, what the description here? The description of listener. So the description of listener will be like this listener you have created inside which package? So IT listener class you have created inside TestNG package. That is the package name. Dot. You need to call this ITest listener class here. Now, if you see the description here, it's quite clear that the listener will be applied to this ITest listener class, and this listener is applied to which particular class? The group login. So when I run this group login, along with this ITest listener will also run. That's the small story here. And that's what listener is doing. So we'll do that. Now let's run this code. So let's run this XML file here. Do right click, go to run as, and run this suite. So you see, when the test started, I got a message, a test execution. Now we'll focus, the process is executing here, but at the same time, this message, the events what I was talking about, I print up here, I just on test started, I print a statement line, the test execution started. Now, once the test case is started, the message, the event is active here. Now, based on the test is successful, the test is failure. So based on the status, you will have the status report based on the status of test case execution. You will have the status report. Now, if you read this console output closely, then you will find when the test started, you had a message, test started, verify. Test is successful. Again, you have a message after test is successful. Again, the checkbox test started. So again, you had this message, check test started. The test failed. So you see the test failed. Basically, the failed on test failed method gets triggered here on test failed. So here you have on test failure, so test failed. So basically what happens based on the state of the test case, so once the test case was successful, I got the message test is successful. That means on successful method was here called. Again on test failed, so on failed message was called. Again when test started, so basically again this was search codes, again success. So basically, what you are seeing here is that based on the state of the test case, the methods from this listener class is called. So you can put your events accordingly, knowing that, okay, the test started, knowing that the test is successful, you can put the events accordingly. That's the story of listener. And this is how the listener is working. And this is one of the most important listener, that is ITest listener. We use it in most of the cases. So you need to remember all the methods. You need to know that based on the test case state, the method gets triggered and it gives you the output accordingly. So if you want to plan any event before the test case execution, after the test case execution, just you can put it there accordingly. The process, the execution, everything is same in case of listeners. Just the thing that matter is the methods there. So in ISuite listener, you'll have different methods, but the execution process will be same. And just you have to understand at which stage basically these are throwing events out. That's all. So if you understand one listener, the rest is you have to just remember the methods and the execution time, the event execution time. That's all. So let's understand about this ISuite listener. So in TestNG, ISuite listener is an interface that's allow you to listen to an event occurring during the entire suite lifecycle. So in TestNG, ISuite listener interface allows you to listen to the event occurring during the entire life cycle. That means basically you know that suite is the main life cycle in case of TestNG. So usually when you will see test report, you will find ICE or you'll find suite test and default test. The suite is the main that takes care of the complete process, and a default test is one that generates default. So in case of this suite listener, it provides methods that are invoked at different stage of the test suite execution, such as before the suite starts, after the suite starts, and before the suite ends, and after the suite ends. So here, basically, you will have two methods: on start, on finish. So on start method is invoked before the test suite starts execution. It provides an ISuite object containing information about the suite. And on finish, this method is invoked after the test suite execution completes. It also provide an ISuite obtaining objects containing information about the suite. So to use ISuite listener, you typically create a class that implements the interface and then register it to your TestNG suite using listener annotation. So the story is same. Just you have to keep in mind the methods. So let's implement it. So as usual, let's create a ISuite listener class. Last time we created ITest listener class. This time we'll create ISuite listener class. Now, once this is done, so in this case, ISuite listener, we have two methods. One is on finish and other one is on start. So we'll paste both these methods here. Cool. So ISuite and these two methods are added. Now just import these methods. Now here I need to implement, because it's an interface, so I need to implement ISuite listener. Now once you implement ISuite listener, these two methods are available for you. Just like in ITest listener we implemented, because it's an interface, then we have to implement. Now again I'm going to apply these listener on this group login, or maybe we can apply on the last time we applied ITest listener, we applied on the class that is group login. So here we are going to do the same. So let me go here, create an XML file, and this time name the XML file as ISuite listener. Finish. Now as usual, let's remove all the classes and keep one that is group login. And here, the way we added the listeners, here in case of ITest listener, we added the listener tags, and inside the listener, we mentioned which particular class we are applying. So the same thing I'm going to do here in listener. I'll mention here that TestNG package dot the name of the ISuite listener class, that is this one. So that means here ISuite listener will be applied to the group login. So and we'll see the execution process. So if you compare, the things are quite similar. The methods we need, what matters here is the events when it occurs. So in case of ISuite listener, it occurs at every stage of code. And in this case, this will occur only two times. One the test ISuite listener on start, and once all the processes are executed at the end in finish. So let's see that. Oh, let me run this. Just a second. Okay, it says ISuite listener class path is not found. Okay, it seems like here the package name I have done something. By mistake, the package name I wrote EET. I must S. Now let's run as TestNG shoot. So the process, you see, on beginning I get on start finish. Now this is the proper execution. You have already seen this before. So the message here is important. On start before the test suite is start. That means this executes before generating the report. In fact, before the methods are start executing, this event occurs when the complete process starts. And suite usually comes in that way. So now here it says its suite reports is also given. So on finish, this is after the suite is complete. So once the suite is complete, you will have the test report. So you have just two events. Like these events are occurring at two places. Once when the complete process starts, after that time everything is executed, and at the end this on finish thing works. That's all. So this is how the ISuite interface is applied, and this is how the execution is. Just what matters here is execution. You need to know that at which point you want to generate events, and accordingly you'll be using listeners. So you'll have that doubt that why we need these listeners. It's because we need to know that at which point we have to generate events, and according to that we'll be using those listeners. So it's not necessary that every time you will get ITest listener to use, that means you are every time generating events at each and every stage. Maybe at some point it will be like you want to generate events on start and on finish, then use the ISuite listener, not go for any other listeners. That's how it works. So as the name suggests, here in IExecution listener, it monitors the beginning and the end of TestNG execution. So this listener is mainly used to start or stop the server while starting or ending the code execution. So in IExecution listener, we have two methods: on execution start, on execution finish. Now we had two methods in ISuite listener as well, but in ISuite listener, the difference was that in ISuite listener, it was like the start point that ISuite listener started. Okay, so it was like when the suite, basically the complete process start, then the ISuite listener executes, start executes, and the end executes. But in this case, on execution start, this executes only once a method execution is started. Now let's see this through code. So you'll get a better picture of this. So as usual, I'm again going to create a new listener class that is IExecution listener. Sorry, I'll make it as IExecution listener class because IExecution listener is itself a interface, implements IExecution listener. Now here, what we are going to do is we are going to track now in this IExecution listener. The one thing that we can do is we can track the start point and the closing point. So basically, we'll mention that this will help us to track the complete execution of the test case. So here I have put a start point where I get the starting point of the test case when the test case execution start, and at the end here basically we'll get the finish by just getting the current time limit time when the test case stopped minus the start point. So that will give me the exact working of the test case. So in IExecution listener, we can track this as well. Now you'll say that why not in other listeners? So in other listeners, basically it's not based on the method execution process. If you see, it's like an IExecution listener executes, you'll see that when the methods are executed based on that. So here, let's create again an XML file, and let me name this XML as IExecution listener. Execution listener. And again, I go to execution listener. As usual, I'll remove all my classes. Cool. Now, as usual, add the listeners here. And inside the listeners, add this listener name TestNG package dot IExecution. Execution listener class. That's how it is. Now let's run this. So here basically this output, the console output is important because the rest output are same. So here you see TestNG is going to start. So once the test case execution start, it's saying TestNG is going to start. Now once the complete process will be executed, so this thing starts once the test case starts. Now we are waiting. So the complete test case execution is done. Now the difference between the ISuite listener on finish and IExecution listener on finish is, you see, this method is invoked when everything is done, generating the report, the complete process, the suite process, everything is done. Then I have this message here. But in case of ISuite listeners and L, the this on finish method executed before the suit. So that's the difference between IExecution. So that's why we can use the timing in this. So it's not that it's like that question will always come to your mind that this timing we can apply in any test case execution, but no, in any, well, like you can say in any listeners you can apply, but not here. It's different. It's because here you have applied it because this like, on finish execution executes once the complete process is done. That's how the execution listener works. and that's the job of execution listener. So you have noticed that every listeners are different based on the events and scenario. That's all about the execution listener. Now this is the last part of the listeners. So first let's understand what exactly this IInvoked listener is. So this listener gets invoked before and after a method in TestNG. So these methods constitutes both test and other configuration methods. So these listeners help to set up the configuration or other cleanup activities. So in case of ITest, it was different. In case of ISuite, it was different. In execution, the time process was recorded. And here, configuration parts can be attached to IInvokedMethod. So here you have two different methods, before invocations and after invocations. So these methods get invoked before every method, and this method gets invoked after every method. So these are method based invocations. So these methods executes based on the methods. Now let's see how we'll implement this. So as usual, uh, we'll create a new class and name that class as IInvokedMethodListener. So I'll create a new class and named it as IInvokedMethodListeners class. And as usual, I'll implement the interface that is implements the interface named as IInvokedListener. Sorry, it's IInvokedMethodListener. Invoked method listener. Now, in this case, in IInvokedMethodListeners, we have two methods, after invocation and before invocations. So again, as usual, I'll put these methods here. And as usual, we'll create a XML file for this and implement these listeners. So I do new, go to TestNG, go to convert to TestNG, and again name it as I invoked method. So again, I go to IInvokedMethod.xml, and here I'll remove all the classes and just script the group login. So usually our main focus is the listener part. So we are not seeing the complete execution, but yeah, we are seeing the main part, that is our listener part, how it's executing, at which point it is executing. So it's very important to know that at this point, this listener is executing. So accordingly, you can use it in future. Now here, I'll call this class here. That's IInvokedListener class. Save it, go to run as, and run it. Now, as usual, our process will run. Now, important part is this method execution. You see, before the method executed, you have this before execution setup. And once the method execution will be done, at the end, straight away, you will have after invocation of setup. So based on every method, now you see, this was for the first method. Now, this is for second method. So every time for every method, you are having a before and after execution report. So that means this method is applied for this particular listener is applied for every method. So to configure before a method or to set up any process before a method and after a method, we use this IInvocation method. So that's what invocation done. So that's how it's different. So I hope the picture of all the four listeners are clear, because you have seen the output in ITest listener, it executes at every stage. In ISuite, it's like it's at the beginning when the test case starts, and at the end, again uh, for for the next one, that is IExecution listener, there it was at the beginning, and when all the test cases were generated, everything at last IExecution listener was executed. And I invoked listener, I invoked method listener, it's after every method execution is done, you'll have this message before and after message. So one will be for before and the other one will be for after. So I hope the difference of these listeners are quite clear by these examples. And this is how we have different options of listeners and we'll be using it based on our requirement. So the concepts of listeners are done. So the extend report is a open source HTML reporting library useful for test automation. So it can be easily integrated with major testing frameworks like JUnit, NUnit, TestNG, etc. So these reports are HTML documents that duplicate the results as pie chart. So usually what we do based on our test cases, like if we have 10 test cases and we want to demonstrate that test cases in HTML format, so that we add to the extend reports. And that is displayed in form of pie charts and in HTML documentation. So the extend report class generate HTML report based on the path specified by the tester. Based on the Boolean flags, the existing reports has to be overwritten or a new report must be generated. So basically, to generate this test reports or just to represent this test reports, we need to display the boolean flag. Based on the boolean flags, like if the test case pass, so we can say okay, true, that test case pass, so you will have a pass output. If it fails, now this test report we keeps on overwriting, we keeps on generating every time new. So these are handwritten test reports. We can say we are writing our own test reports, and usually in real time what we do, we configure in such way that these reports straight away goes and gets configured. Now, if for writing this test reports, so the classes used for extend report is the extend report class, the extend test class, and extend Spark reporter. So the first one, this extend Spark reporter, this is a rich HTML reporter available for standard extend reports library. So this section outlines a few unique feature presents. So basically using this extend Spark reporter, we specify the location to which location the HTML report will store, and as well as convert, you can say we convert the complete report in HTML format. So extend Spark reporter is used for that. Now, extend report, this report class generate HTML report based on path specified by the tester. So based on the Boolean flags, the existing reports has to be overwrite or a new report must be generated. So using this extend report class, we generate HTML report. So based on the tester's descriptions, this generate the extend report. Now extend test class. This class is used to log test steps on previously generated HTML report. So just like after generating report, if you want to extend that report to the Spark reporter, we do that through extend test. So in this extend report section, we are going to use these three classes: extend reports, extend test, and extend Spark reporter. So basically, to run the extend report, first thing what we need to do is we need to first add the dependencies. So we'll go to Maven repository and here search for extend reports. So don't give spaces between extend and report and search for extend reports. So once this extend reports, the first one is available, click on this, go to the latest version, copy the dependencies from here and add it to your Maven project. Now, after adding the dependencies, just save it. Now, in this TestNG package, I'm going to create a new class and name this class as Extend Reports class. And in this Extend Reports class, I'll create a test case and name the test case as, or I'll say using test annotation, I'll write public void login test. This is the method over here. Now, in this method, you remember in the last video, I talked about the three classes that usually will come across. So here we are going to use those three classes. Now, what are these three classes here? So the first one was extend Spark Reporter. And there I said, like, this is used. So I'll create an object. This is used basically to pass the location of the folder where you are going to generate reports. Sorry, it's extend Spark Report. Great. So now here, you need to create a folder in your project, and basically that will be the path where this extend report will go. So I'll do right click here, and from here I'll go to new. So I'll do right click in my project. From there I'll go to new, and from there to folder, and I'll create a folder named as extend report. And here I'm going to give the location of that folder, that is extend report. And now this will come inside double quotes. And also here I'll give the HTML extension that will generate here. So here I'll create an HTML extension, name it as extend.html. Fine. Now I'll import this extend Spark Reporter. So I'll import this. Now what's next? So the next class, if you remember, is extend reports. That's basically used to extend or attach the status, whatever the status we generate. So the next one will be extend reports, and this basically used to extend the reports, or you can say it's used to attach the report. So now again we'll import this as well, extend reports. And here in this parameter, we are not going to pass anything inside this parameter. It's like I've written the wrong spell. Is it extend reports? Yeah, that's the name. It's extend reports. Now in this, using this extend reports, we'll call a method that is attach report. The method name will be here as attach report, sorry, dot attach reporter. And here we'll attach the report, whichever the report it's going to generate over here. So we'll do that. Now once this is done, basically we have to generate report. So this is the report that is generated, that is SPRK. So this report we will attach whatever we get in extend reports or we get in extends, we'll attach to that report. Now the last one is extend test. That's basically used to handle the Boolean sections. You can say the logger one. And I'll write here extend dot create test. So here I need to give the test name, the login test. Now I'm giving these details manually. Usually when you will be writing codes, this will come through the method names and all. So here I'm giving it manually right now just to show you how it works. Now after that, the next thing we are going to do is we need to set the logger. Logger means we need to set the status. So I say logger dot log, and in this log we will pass the status. First status dot info, and the next one here in info will pass here basically what info, the steps shown, basically whatever the steps shown is the uses of login test, we can write that. This is the info that will show in the test cases. The step is login process. That's all. Now next one comes the status, like what's the status of the test case. So the status of test case is basically pass. So I'll pass that. Next, a message along with it, that is testing passed. So in this status, basically we pass that what's the status of that test case, and at the end we pass that what exactly like the message along with that. That's all. Now once everything is done, at the end you need to pass the flush method. So the complete process will be closed here using extend.flush. The complete process will close over here. Now this looks a very simple code. Now if you see the process, what exactly we are doing in logger, we are passing the status. Using extend.create, we pass the method name, and once in this extend the method name or the status everything is available, then using this attached reporter, we attach it to convert it in form of HTML. That's all the story here is. So that's why I've created a simple program, so at least you can see the complete process of extend report, how what these classes are used for, and how we are generating an HTML report. So in this case, just we will run this code, and when you run here, then what happens in this project itself, in this folder, the folder which I have specified here as extend report, this extend.html report will be added. So just to see this, go to the project, right click and refresh. And you see in extend report, HTML content is there. That's called extend.html. Now, once this is open, you'll see how it looks like. It looks like just an HTML website. And it looks like just another HTML website. And here, basically, you'll find a report in HTML format. That's all. And it's very interesting. So here you see how the report looks like. This is how the report looks like. The HTML format, the name login test, as well as if you have passed the status as passed. So you see the status here is passed. Now again, the info, whatever the info I've given, the steps in login process at the time of pass, the message that I was trying to generate, that is also here. The timing, everything is here. In fact, it's a complete dashboard type of thing. If you want to see the same thing in pie chart, you see in pie chart, it's mentioned one event passed, and because the event is passed, it's completely green, and one section is info. So the log events, that is also mentioned. So this is in form of pie chart. Again, when it started, when it ended, everything is mentioned here in the test report. That's how the HTML report looks like, and that's where we use the extend report. So in real-time projects, we will create this HTML format content so that the team members can easily get an idea of that all the test cases are passed or whatever the status of all the test cases is. So that's about the extend report, and that's the last thing you need to know in TestNG to just start working with TestNG. I hope you like the videos, and maybe these videos will help you to perform different projects. So that's all for TestNG. Thank you.